Video game trailers seem to be a bit of a lost art form nowadays. Obviously games still get trailers, but they don't seem to be as big of a deal as they used to be. I think the biggest part of it is just that E3 isn't a thing anymore, since that was really the main place where companies would try to get people excited for whatever new games or consoles that they were working on. Now that E3 is dead and has been for a couple of years now, and most companies just do their own press conferences Nintendo Direct style, I feel like there aren't as many huge game trailers that everybody sees anymore. But that's just me, maybe I'm just more out of the loop than I like to think I am. But game trailers, and trailers in general for movies and other such forms of media, serve a pretty simple purpose: to give people a snippet of what to expect from whatever game they're advertising and get people to want to buy said game. Usually games will show this by showing really cool looking gameplay, or maybe some bits of cutscenes, maybe a pre-rendered trailer, to get people excited for the story, slap some licensed music over top of it, and boom, you have a pretty typical video game trailer. For some developers and publishers though, they think that that isn't enough to sell people on their game. Some developers and publishers have to rely on, well, lying to get people interested in their game. There have been plenty of game trailers throughout the years that have been bending the truth at best and downright lying at worst. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of my favorite examples of misleading video game marketing and trailers. Techland is one of my favorite game studios. The Dying Light games, and particularly Dying Light 1 and its expansion The Following, are some of my favorite games ever made, period, let alone zombie games. But Dying Light wasn't their first foray into zombie video games. That would be 2011's Dead Island. Dead Island is a game that I'm super nostalgic for since I used to play it at my cousin's house when I was younger, and I'd even say that it's pretty underrated nowadays. I mean, I probably played the opening chunk of this game like 30 times or so throughout my life. Sure, Dead Island has a lot of problems, like the story and characters are just nothing for the most part, and playing it nowadays, it really does feel kind of just like a beta version of Dying Light without the parkour. Plus, I feel like the game definitely peaks in its first act when you're at the resort, and once you start going inland on the titular Dead Island, it loses a lot of the charm of the setting, and it kind of really starts to feel like Dying Light when you're in the Old Town part of the game, especially in my opinion. It's just a mindless, dumb fun kind of zombie game. It's at its best when you're just killing zombies with fun weapons and abilities, so in spite of all its flaws, it's still a game that has a really special place in my heart. The problem is though, people didn't want a dumb zombie game with a mediocre story and characters because that's not the game they were advertised, at least not initially. Dead Island was originally announced at E3 back in 2006, but there wasn't really much that was announced regarding this version of the game. I mean, I even found a lost media Reddit thread looking for more info and footage of this version of Dead Island, so for all intents and purposes, this game may as well have been cancelled to the average gamer. That was until February 2011, E3. Zombies were obviously popular before this, but this was the 2000s, and I'd say the 2000s was the decade where their popularity started to really snowball. And by 2011, zombie mania was really starting to hit its peak. You know, The Walking Dead's first season had just premiered a few months prior, and was, in my opinion, what really ushered in the peak of zombie mania. And at this E3, Techland showed an artistic reveal trailer for Dead Island that completely renewed interest in the game among the gaming populace. The Dead Island trailer is, in my opinion, the best kind of trailer. It's one that you can appreciate even when it's on its own, completely separate from whatever it was originally intended to be a trailer for. I mean, if you cut out the studio logos and the end card showing info about the game, you could tell someone that this was just a short film called Dead Island, and they would probably believe you. The trailer is edited in a super cool way, where the footage keeps alternating between the end of the trailer being rewound and then the beginning of the trailer playing forwards, and then the two meet in the middle at the end. It's hard to explain, but voice crack. It's hard to explain, but you'll get it if you watch it. Plus, the reverse segments are muted while the normal bits have sound, which helps the jumps back and forth to have more impact. The thing that really sells the trailer though is undoubtedly the music, which is an absolute tearjerker of a piece that just consists of piano and strings, but it's what gives the trailer most of its emotional impact. The trailer follows a family consisting of a mom, a dad, and their daughter, and the trailer opens on the daughter already dead and lying on the grass outside of the hotel on the titular Dead Island, and the rest of the trailer is spent showing us how she ended up there. We see that she was being chased by zombies back to her hotel room and was bitten. Parents take her into the room and lay her down as the zombies start breaking through the door, and in no time at all, the girl turns into a zombie and jumps on her dad's back, and she bites him as the mom gets overwhelmed by zombies. And then the dad ends up throwing his now zombified daughter off his back and out the window where she falls to her death. At least that's the chronological order. Obviously the trailer's edited differently, so it ends with the dad reaching for his daughter right after she gets bitten. End the trailer with some camcorder footage of the family checking in at the hotel, excited for their vacation, and it really lands as an emotional gut punch of a trailer. And this trailer got people really excited for Dead Island. It seemed like a mature game with an emphasis on leaving an emotional impact on players. So basically the complete opposite of what Dead Island actually ended up being. This trailer actually ties into one of the biggest controversies regarding the game when it released, and it contributed to Dead Island receiving pretty mixed reactions when it came out. The game's tone wasn't anything like the trailer. When the game came out and it was, well, people felt like they had been lied to. In this case, the best part of the trailer also ended up being its biggest failing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the main game. The only thing in the main game that even ties into this trailer somewhat is that you can find the hotel room with the dead mom and dad in the game's prologue. But you can do that literally within seconds of gaining control of your character after starting a new game. But honestly, that would be a pretty cool speedrun. Dead Island Family %, let's make it happen. Thankfully, people who wanted more story-focused and emotional zombie games would be in luck, as the next couple years would have several heavy hitters, my personal favorite being Season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead from 2012, which is a game that makes me cry like a big fat baby every single time I replay it. At least with Dead Island, you can make an argument that since the trailer doesn't depict any gameplay or anything regarding the main plot of Dead Island, it wasn't technically misleading. The same can't be said for Halo 5. I'm probably a way bigger Halo fan than most other people my age. I mean, I wasn't even alive for Combat Evolved in Halo 2, but thanks to the Master Chief Collection in Halo 5, I got into the series in middle school, and even though I don't really play it as much anymore, I still love the story, the world, and the gameplay of the series. Even the ones that people don't really like as much. Halo 5 is a very polarizing game in the series. On one hand, it has great gameplay and multiplayer, but the story is generally considered to be the worst in the series. And since the story in Halo is a lot more important than the story in a lot of other first-person shooter games, the story in 5 being bad is a huge knock against it. But people were expecting a much better story, because they were marketed a much different story. Halo has always been a series that did marketing incredibly well. There was the I Love Bees ARG that hyped up Halo 2, as well as explained the reason for the Covenant invasion of Earth that was one of the major plot points of Halo 2 and Halo 3. Then there's also Halo 3's legendary Believe ad campaign that was framed as an in-universe documentary centering around a museum and memorial commemorating the Human Covenant War. It was a bunch of live-action trailers filled with props and interviews with veterans, in air quotes, of the Human Covenant War, and there was also just the whole-ass, big-ass, real-ass war diorama that Bungie built and used as the centerpiece of the main Believe ad. So Halo as a series has a legacy of incredibly immersive in-universe marketing. I don't know what the term for it would be, maybe it qualifies as like unfiction, but my point is most of the marketing for the Halo games also exists in some form in-universe. Halo 5's marketing, which is often all just referred to as Hunt the Truth due to the hashtag that was associated with it, was massive, and it did an incredible job of building hype for Halo 5. There was the main Hunt the Truth podcast, which most people agree told a better story than the actual game, and it starred Keegan-Michael Key as the main character, a reporter who was hunting the truth about the UNSC and Oni in the Halo universe. Then there was Nightfall, a full TV miniseries introducing Spartan Locke, who was the new protagonist of Halo 5. And then there were the live-action trailers. Really, most of the marketing was centered around the intrigue of the story, the idea that in Halo 5, Master Chief goes rogue and Locke has to hunt him down and possibly kill him. There were even twin trailers that released with Chief and Locke in mirrored situations, with one about to execute the other before cutting to the Hunt the Truth hashtag, obviously getting people to argue about what the truth even was anymore with the series. The marketing really tried to make it seem like in Halo 5, the Master Chief would be a villain, or at least a much more morally gray character than he was in Halo Combat Evolved through Halo 4. Except in the actual game, that just wasn't the case. To make a long story short, the trailers really over-exaggerated how important Chief going rogue and his rivalry with Locke would be in the game. The trailers made it seem like their fight would be a climactic event for the story. Instead, they only fight once in the game halfway through in a cutscene that lasts like a minute, and then the whole hunting Chief part of the story kinda just gets thrown out the window, and then the rest of the story of the game is just about stopping Cortana. And there are a lot of theories as to why the Halo 5 marketing was so misleading. Some think it was straight up meant to be deceiving from the start to get people to buy the game. If this was the case, then it was successful, at least initially, as Halo 5 sold incredibly well right off the bat, even breaking some records, like how it had at the time the most successful launch of any Halo game in the series, and it was also the fastest selling digital game in Xbox history at the time. But 343 Studios straight up just lying from the start seems a little too malicious to be true. The theory that I personally subscribe to is that the game probably just had a major rewrite so late into development that the marketing was already set in stone so it couldn't be changed. This makes a lot of sense to me since the 343 Halo games haven't had a very consistent story direction, with each of their 3 games trying to go in completely different directions from the others. So I think it's pretty believable that they were forced to make some change to the story late in development, and that led to the marketing coming off as misleading to a lot of people. I mean, you can't make and change a TV miniseries that quickly on the fly like that. Shit like that needs to be done way in advance. And this led to the marketing coming off as misleading to a lot of people. At least for Dead Island and Halo 5, most of the misleading marketing was more in regards to the tone or the story of the games, but sadly for other games, the marketing is much more downright deceptive about the game and its quality as a whole. The Alien movie series is a lot like Star Wars. The only movies everyone agrees are good are the first 2. And also, much like Star Wars, the Alien franchise has many video games, with their quality being a complete mixed bag. But the game I want to focus on here is Aliens Colonial Marines. The big kahuna, the white whale. You're more than likely at least a little familiar with this game, as in the 12 years since it was released, it's gone down as one of the worst video games ever made. The game was developed by Gearbox, who aside from the Borderlands games, which I am a pretty big fan of admittedly, they don't make good games. Duke Nukem Forever was a flop, Battleborn was a flop, and Aliens Colonial Marines was the king of flops. I mean, those are also the only big non-Borderlands games they've made since 2009, unless you count like Penn and Teller VR. But I don't. But Aliens Colonial Marines was probably the go-to example of a game with misleading marketing up until a certain newer game release that we'll get to very soon. The trailers made it seem like an incredibly polished action horror shooter that accurately replicated the vibe of Aliens, the movie that this game was supposed to act as a direct sequel to. Instead, the game launched as a buggy mess with broken enemy AI that hardly worked due to a one-letter typo in the game's code. Yes, that's real, and you can just look it up. But there's a lot of behind-the-scenes drama as to why this game came out in the horrible state that it did, and it basically has to do with the fact that Gearbox, but more specifically Randy Pitchford, apparently always considered Colonial Marines a lower priority title than Borderlands 1 and 2, both of which were fully developed and released during Colonial Marines' 6-year development process. Gearbox regularly reassigned staff from Colonial Marines to work on Borderlands 1 and 2, and especially Borderlands 1, since that game made a very last-minute change to the cel-shaded art style that would become one of that series' most iconic defining characteristics. This overhaul required a lot of manpower that Gearbox got from their team that was working on Colonial Marines. Then Borderlands was a smash hit, and Gearbox started to outsource a lot of Colonial Marines' work to focus on Borderlands 2 instead. And look, I get it. Obviously, you're gonna care more about your company's own original IP, your passion project, as opposed to a contract job with Sega, who were the publishers of Colonial Marines. But Gearbox handled it probably in the worst way possible, leading to one of surprisingly many embezzlement scandals that Randy has been involved in. So the game comes out, and it was horrible, but the trailers made it seem worlds better than the final product. So Gearbox and Sega got sued for false advertising, and it ended up going class action for a little while before losing the class action status, but there was a class action lawsuit over this game. And even after Colonial Marines came and went, its stink stuck around and affected the release of Alien Isolation. Colonial Marines' failure alongside Isolation's abysmal IGN review, which that's a topic for another day, but those are more than likely 2 of the major factors for the game underperforming, and it taking 10 years for a sequel to Isolation to be announced. Seriously, if you want a good Alien game and somehow haven't played Isolation already, just go play Alien Isolation. Ubisoft in particular is just a studio that has had several controversies over the years regarding misleading marketing and the final versions of their games at launch just being generally downgraded from the trailers. I don't really hear much about it with a lot of their newer games, but there are 3 main games that come to mind when I think of Ubisoft advertising scandals, a trifecta, if you will. Watch Dogs, Rainbow Six Siege, and The Division. And we're gonna go through all of them super quick. The Watch Dogs E3 trailer is probably the least misleading, since it's mostly the graphics that were different. The trailer looked absolutely incredible for a game in 2012, which was the year that the game was revealed, because this was supposed to be the next-gen title for Ubisoft. This was supposed to be what the next-gen consoles at the time, the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, were capable of, and it just blew everybody away. When the game launched in 2014, it still looked pretty good sometimes, especially if it was nighttime and if it was rainy, but sunny days just looked kind of washed out and bland. Aside from that though, Watch Dogs just kind of came and went and didn't really leave much of an impact on people until Watch Dogs 2 came out a couple years later and was actually a really good game. But now for the more fun ones. Rainbow Six Siege's E3 2014 trailer is probably, aside from the Watch Dogs trailer, Ubisoft's most infamous trailer ever. It's supposed to be an incredibly scripted and cinematic multiplayer match on House, but it just doesn't play like the actual game at all because it's not real gameplay. I mean, shocker. It's basically just a cutscene playing out in engine, which is a big contributing factor as to why the trailer not only has a much better graphics than the final game, but has a lot more detail and stuff like its animations. Especially the hostage, they're way more animated and just have much more personality and character than they do in the main game, where they're kind of just a static prop. And the trailer is obviously supposed to capture the vibe and the pace of the previous Rainbow Six games like Vegas 1 and 2, but Siege just isn't like that, now more than ever. Then there's The Division's E3 2013 trailer, and it's pretty similar to the Siege trailer, you know, fancy graphics, scripted gunfights, and people pretending to be players doing voiceover to make the whole thing seem like gameplay, or seem more like gameplay at least. The Rainbow Six Siege trailer had that, and I forgot to mention it.
Alright, I'm coming out. Left, one on the right. Okay, two more on the right.
I can't see him. Window's blocked.
All right, hang on, I got it. Nice. Go.
Hang on. Got him.
I'd honestly say that this trailer does an even worse job at correctly representing what the final product would be than the Siege trailer, since there's basically no indication in this trailer that The Division is a looter shooter. Although, to be fair, this trailer did come out like 3 years before the final game did, so that seems like it would be a long enough time to make a fundamental change like that to the foundation of a game. So honestly, I'd be willing to bet money that Ubisoft added in the whole looter shooter aspect after Destiny came out, which happened while they were working on The Division. And there are probably more Ubisoft trailers I could talk about, but those are the main three that come to mind, and I didn't want to dwell on them for too long since they don't really falsely advertise the gameplay, more so the level of polish that the games would have. That, and those are some of the most commonly talked about examples of false marketing for video games, so there's not really a whole lot new I could bring to the table. But now it's time to talk about the biggest and most recent example of a game that was straight up falsely marketed: The Day Before. The Day Before was the game to make fun of back in December of 2023. For anyone who wasn't following the drama back then, in the simplest terms possible, The Day Before was a scam game. It was supposed to be an open world zombie survival MMO, kind of like DayZ, but it was supposed to be way more high budget and in-depth than DayZ, which is already probably the most high budget and in-depth zombie survival MMO. The studio who made the game, and that's game in air quotes, fantastic, but it's fantastic without the first A, so it's fantastic. Like Fantastic.
Say that again?
They made a ton of super high quality trailers for the game. Ironically enough, the game's announcement trailer has in retrospect been accused of straight up copying The Division's trailer, not only because the trailer is highly scripted and just, you know, generally not real, but also just the whole post-apocalyptic, snowy, and Christmassy city aesthetic of The Day Before's trailer is the exact same thing that The Division was going for in its aesthetic department. Over the next few years, more trailers came out and the hype started building, and eventually The Day Before ended up as the #1 wishlisted game on Steam. That's how many people were interested in this open world zombie survival MMO game. And I'll spare you this super in-depth story because there's a ton of drama revolving around the development of this game, and I could be here for an hour talking about it. But better YouTubers than me have made videos chronicling the whole story of The Day Before, so if you want all the details, I would recommend just watching one of those videos. But the game came out on December 7th, 2023, and became the internet's punching bag for the next couple of days. Basically all the problems that all the other games in this video faced, The Day Before also had. The graphics were a massive downgrade from the trailers. The enemy zombies had their enemy AI massively just worsened from the trailers, and they were super scarce, and they posed basically no threat to the players compared to how dangerous they looked in the trailers. But uniquely, the game had also straight up lied about its genre, because The Day Before did not in fact turn out to be an open world zombie survival game. It was instead just a really poorly made asset flip extraction shooter. Think of it as like the worst possible version of Escape from Tarkov. So think of it as the worst possible version of the worst possible game you can play. There was no open world, there were just big abandoned maps you could load into and loot up, not to mention the bugs, because the game was broken, plain and simple. It really did feel like Fantastic just threw something together to get something out because they had been advertising this game for so long while not actually building a real game, and nobody was satisfied with it. May I remind you, this was a highly anticipated game. And remember when I said that The Day Before was a punching bag for days after it released? Because that's how long the game was available for. Back in my delisted games video, I talked about Concord, and I said, it's led to the game getting shut down in only 2 weeks, which I'm pretty sure is a record. Well, I was wrong. The real record belongs to the day before, which got shut down in a grand total of 4 days. Steam offered full refunds on the game to anyone who bought it, so hopefully everyone got their money back. But you can't get back all that time people spent excited for this thing, because time is money. Only for those expectations to be completely shattered come launch day. But that's pretty much it. Thankfully, games having misleading marketing or trailers isn't really something that happens too often nowadays. At least not in AAA gaming. This used to happen a ton with a lot of crowdfunded games on Kickstarter, but Kickstarter just isn't as popular of a way to fund games anymore. Especially not compared to its big boom in the 2010s. And I think a big part of it is just that people have been burned so many times, either by Kickstarter games ending up being, scams, or people just take money and run, or just not living up to expectations. But that's a topic for another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like or subscribing if you haven't already. It really means a lot, and it really helps to support the channel. Peace out and God bless. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, cause I got it like that. Flow so smooth like I got it on tap. Yeah, and I'ma say it be a good night while I'm on my Yingling, while I'm drinking Bud Light. Can you get it when you miss